Okay, we're recording.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for posting your, what you teach, what you hope to teach, and the grade level, and where in the world you are. It's very helpful to know for me, and I think for each other. I'm going to launch right in because we have 30 minutes, and I want you to come away with as much as you can. So you read the description of our session. You may or may not know children as young as 2 to 5 years old, certainly by 5, as young as 2, they notice difference in people. They notice difference in skin color. They notice difference in hair texture, in the way people talk. What they don't do is attach judgment to those noticing of differences until they hear it unintentionally from the adults around them. I'm going to tell you, if I were to tell you one person to look at to find out more, would be Louise Derman Sparks, DERMAN-Sparks, and I'll put her in the chat. Anything by her. She writes a lot about anti-bias education among young children. She has a wonderful book called What If All the Children Were White? Because a lot of teachers ask me, how do I do multicultural education if my students are majority white or all white? So let's look at one example. Let's say a kid says, Jeremy looks like a fudge brownie. What do you imagine, not necessarily your response, but kind of a typical teacher response to that? What can you hear a typical teacher saying in response? Anybody?
Maybe interesting observation, Jeremy.
Okay, interesting observation, Jeremy. That would be better than what I've heard. Have you ever heard someone say, that's not nice? Or we don't talk about that here. Does that ring a bell as a potential response to noticing skin color, hair texture, a different name they haven't heard before? It's pretty commonly teachers will tell me that they'll hear, they might self say, that's not nice, we don't talk about that here, or apologize to Jeremy. So, of course, that seems like the right thing to do, but the message is apologize to Jeremy for naming his skin color. We don't talk about that here. That, I have to tell you, that is so common. And if kids, we don't talk about that here, must be bad. And not only is it bad, we don't talk about it. So Louise Derman Sparks and others say it seeps down into the kids, where it stays because they learn not to talk about it. And then this idea that whatever they've noticed is bad gets built on in subsequent interactions with adults. And I'll give you a quick example. I was teaching a class at of students from small southern New Jersey towns who white students, all white. They live in small, pretty insular beach towns in southern Jersey, and pretty uniformly said they don't like going to Atlantic City. I mean, some said they never go to Atlantic City. Others said they don't like going. And then I mentioned Philadelphia, like, no. Both involve a bridge over to Atlantic City, bridge over to Philadelphia, because those are bad areas. I live in Philly. I mean, Philly's, it's the fifth largest city in the country. It's bad, right? So, and Atlantic City has a large Black population. Philadelphia has a large Black population. It just occurred to me something that's related. In a recent study, more than half of white parents who were surveyed, this was done by Jennifer Eberhardt, who wrote a great book called Biased. She found that, and others have found too, that more than half of white parents, there's a tipping point. When a school reaches a certain percentage of Black students, white parents stop sending their kids there. That percentage is 30%. That's what they can tolerate. And beyond that, they don't send their kids to that school because it's too Black. Anyway, back to my students not wanting to go over the bridge in Atlantic City. And by the way, it's bad for them is a fact. It's a given. How that comes to be seen as true is something we look at in class. And I was so struck by a student who said they remember being a little kid, driving with their dad to Atlantic City, and they'd be in the front seat, their dad's driving, their dad would reach around, I don't know if you can see me on the screen, but reach around and lock the car door, reach around the kid to lock the car door before there were self-locking cars. Not saying a word, but the message was, we need to be safe, there's danger here. This student hadn't thought of that at all. It came back to them. So an alternative, all right, so that's a typical teacher response. An alternative and a great source for this is Teaching for Tolerance is now called Learning for Justice. If you know Teaching for Tolerance, they have a great free magazine and lots of free resources, multiple copies of lessons and all kinds of things. I think it's a biannual magazine. Learning for Justice has a great video called Starting Small. And there and in other places, teachers are responding to Jeremy looks like a fudge brownie by saying, doesn't Jeremy look like the yummiest fudge brownie? And what do I look like? I'm kind of seeing strawberry shortcake here. And Candace, maybe the inside of a Three Musketeers. Someone else might be a hot chocolate. And in some classes, how in early grades kids make their own self-portraits. In some classes, and I think this is in Starting Small, teachers will have the kids not just pick a paint color, but mix the paints to get the color just right. This is me. No, I need a little more something here. Others will mix crayons. And I'll give you another example. I think we have time for this. So immigrant kids from immigrant families, whether they immigrated themselves or not, you've probably had kids from Vietnam, Thailand, China, Russia, who say, my name is Mike. My name is Tina. Not their given name, not their family name, not what they're called at home. It's a different identity at school. And many people have talked about how, language, Gloria Anzaldúa, I'll put her up too. She said language is twin skin to identity. So our names, we know how much our names matter, how much kids love hearing their names. And when they say, so ubiquitously, call me Mike, call me Tina, it's keeping part of themselves outside the classroom door. So not only is it that other kids aren't learning to value different sounds, different names, different cultures, but that kid themselves is not bringing all of who they are in the classroom to be fully present. So I had a teacher, a guest speaker, come to my class with little kids one day, and her name was Ms. Nakawatase. And one kid said, that's a funny name. And I said, you haven't heard that name before, huh? Nakawatase. Let's say it, Nakawatase. You know what? Before Ms. Nakawata says, let's all say her name, Nakawatase. And pretty soon we're going, Nakawatase. And, and the kids are celebrating her. She's beaming. Also, you can, of course, later turn into a phonics lesson, right? Nakawatase. The A sounds the same all the way through. You can have a kid named Natalie in class, Natalie. Oh, she's got an A that sounds like Nakawatase, but she's got another A. Robin Campbell is someone I love for doing these kind of things with phonics. And I'll also put him up. Okay. I have so much more time than I thought, because you're going to edit this part. There's actually only one of you there. I'm going to take a sip.
You're doing great. This is so interesting, Rachel. I'm really like I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, so I'm really glad that I'm in attendance for this. So we'll chat more when you're done.
Why don't you tell me now? Because we have the time, and I could, yeah.
No, I think this is such an interesting topic, and I really I can relate to this this idea of kind of sheltering our children without sheltering our children. I realize I have two young children, not so young. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, but I find that their relationship to race issues is they come at it from such a safe place where it's almost they almost know this without being taught this is not something we talk about at home, but they're nervous to ask questions. They're nervous to ask, why is this person's skin color different? It's an interesting time of year right now getting holiday cards, and we happen to have a lot of friends who have families that come from all different places. They've got adopted children, they've got it's mixed marriages, and so I can see my kids kind of processing. They're trying to understand how the color of skin works in a family unit. They're like, I can see the wheels turning, but they're afraid to ask. And I feel like that's not anything. We've never been like, we can't talk about skin. Like we're very open in my household about that. But for some reason, they're nervous to say, that's interesting. Why are the parents white and 2 of the 4 children black? They're not able to say that. So I find that, and I wonder in the classroom, what that looks like. My children happen to attend, and I'm not happy about this, but a pretty homogenous school. It's a pretty white school. There's some a little bit of diversity. It's getting better each year with a little more diversity. But I really wonder how the 4th grade teacher and the kindergarten teacher address this. I'd be curious to ask them that question.
Yeah. Do you think you would?
I think I would. I actually know, I know my older son's teacher pretty well. And I actually know my younger son's teacher. She was my older son's kindergarten teacher many years ago. She just returned from an extended leave. So I would be very, I'd be curious to ask how that's approached in the classroom. And I'm sure well, actually, no, I'm not sure. I guess my question is, I wonder if their response would be the same in the current school, or if they were teaching in a much more racially diverse school, if their response would differ.
In my experience, are they white themselves? And, of course, better than I do, 85% of teachers in this country are white. In my experience, it doesn't matter who the students are. I'm still hearing, you would think this is kind of outdated, but I'm still hearing, if I try to ask about this, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. And then you're not seeing Jeremy.
The individual, you're not seeing,
Jeremy's right there and he's black. So,
and that's an important part of who Jeremy is,
right,
as an individual.
Right. So much that's really interesting to me. You'll relate to this, Megan. It's a book of interviews with survivors of concentration camps. And one woman says, if you don't know I'm from Auschwitz, you don't know, if you don't know I was in Auschwitz, you can't know me. But once you know I was in Auschwitz, you don't see anything else.
Yeah.
So he's not black in every single minute of his life. That's not the salient feature. But it is, especially in a classroom where there are a few other black kids or black boys. It's certainly there for Jeremy. Be interesting. I'm just thinking of you with the pictures, the holiday cards, and saying, we got another one from a mixed family. In your school, you don't see that. I don't know. I just would be tempted to say I got away with a lot with, well, my daughter went to a public school in Philadelphia, so she was one of the 10% white kids, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little different. Teachers can still, though, really shut the door on discussions like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I feel like, I navigate that, and I remember navigating that as a student. And it's a question I've just never asked of how are they navigating that in, a pretty white elementary school, for example. And you're giving me some ideas of questions that I would like to honestly just, for no other purpose than just having an understanding of what's happening in the school. That would be an interesting question to ask. How would you deal with this if asked, or if somebody made a comment in the class?
Oh, if you do, you'll tell me?
I will, promise. No,
Okay.
I'm gonna, I absolutely will. I'm very curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's so compelling. Go ahead.
no, it is. And I think, there's no right way. And, we don't want to
No.
coach students or our teachers to say the right thing, because there's no right thing. But
Oh
it's
my God.
this idea
Oh my
of,
God.
observing everybody in the moment and acknowledging what makes us unique, and acknowledging everybody in their present state, who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I have another. Oh, can I give you another? I'll give you. Yeah, I have time for another quick example, actually,
Sure.
in the official 30 minutes. Finding ways to allow kids to bring all of who they are into the room. So I'll give you a really strong example. So one example is, a lot of teachers have timelines around the room, important dates in history. This will be more upper elementary. I think a beautiful thing to do is add the children's families' histories. When their Aunt Doris opened the first Dominican hair salon in 1972 in Trenton, or, when their abuela was finally able to bring their aunts and uncles here, um, from Colombia. Those sort of, and then families come in and say, "Oh my gosh, you have my family as important dates." But the other thing is, Arlette Willis wrote an article in Harvard Ed Review. So she's a professor. She gets published in Harvard Ed Review. She's a very distinguished professor. She has 3 sons. The youngest is 9. Every single Monday morning, he's asked to write what he did on the weekend. I know most teachers don't do that anymore, but and she gets a note home saying that his writing lacks fluency. She's a professor of literacy. He writes at home, doesn't lack fluency. She's just wondering what's going on. And so he's asked to write every Monday what he did on the weekend. Every other Saturday, he goes with his older 2 brothers, who normally want nothing to do with him, to a barber shop to keep a really sharp part in his hair. He's the only Black boy in the room. He knows, he's figured out that other kids won't understand why he goes to the barber shop every 2 weeks. He never writes about that. The highlight of the highlights, he's learned to self-censor. What's okay to say here, what's not. And then he's seen as lacking fluency. Yeah, yeah. So much to yeah. I guess so here's a parallel thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's switching gears a little bit, but I think it's quite parallel. You all learned about Rosa Parks in school, I'm assuming. I've had students I've had teachers who are students of mine in other countries who also learned about Rosa Parks. For those of you who did, just real off the cuff, off the top of your head, what's the first thing you remember learning about Rosa Parks? Go. Anybody?
Her strong will.
Her strong will. Okay. Strong will because
She didn't back down.
she didn't back down. Yeah. In the face, so she was sitting alone on a bus, decided to go to the back, did not back down. Do you remember other things? You may not. I mean, for some of this is going way back, others not so far. So I don't know. But remember anything else?
I could be wrong, but I remember her calmness. I remember the fact that she didn't get agitated, and she she kept her cool in what I imagine. And I remember thinking about this, that if I was in that situation, I'd probably start crying. And I would stand up and do as I was told, probably.
So that is so powerful. The two things you said, her strong will, because you could have strong will, but still demonstrate some fear. But her
Yeah.
staying calm. I want to come back to those two things. A lot of, does anybody remember hearing that she was tired that day? Okay, some of you do, some of you don't. Right. So, but whatever you heard, she did this by herself, is the story that we're told. The truth about Rosa Parks is she was a member of the local NAACP in Mobile, Alabama. And the NAACP chapter was looking for someone who could do exactly what you said, Megan. Someone who could carry this off under intense media scrutiny also. She's not just facing the white bus driver and the white police who got on. There's also media covering this, and I'll tell you why there were media. And someone who could withstand that, stay calm. And then the second thing is, could also withstand being jailed, which was brutal at that time in Mobile, Alabama, if you were Black. So Rosa Parks chose to do this very, very deliberately. And the bus boycott did not start because one day she decided to sit down and not move. For months prior to that, and maybe some of you have heard this, for months prior to that, there were scores of people mimeographing. That's an old way of making copies of flyers to pass out. A bunch of organizing, because what it took for people to boycott the bus was to be willing to walk to work, which could mean 2 hours there, 2 hours back, had to be willing, someone has to leave for they gave their children breakfast, had to figure out carpools. This took a huge it was a huge organizing feat. And yet, the way history is taught to young kids is that there was just one brave woman who took a stand, and that spontaneously started the boycott. There was something I just said I was going to come back to, and it flew out of my head. I'm so sorry. Sorry. Maybe it will as we go on. So the reason I'm using this example is that's how change happens, right? It's through people working together. And I have an example from real life. When my daughter was in second grade, I was talking to a friend whose daughter was also in second grade. The daughter is Chinese American. And the mother was telling me that kids at school were yelling at Allie, her daughter, saying, China girl, is what they were yelling at her. And my friend was asking me, Allie had come home and reported this. My friend was asking me, the expert, what she should do. I'm going to tell you why later. I was embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by this, but I said to her, oh, you have to talk to the teacher. You have to talk to the teacher. So then I go sit down at dinner with my family, and I'm telling this story. And my second grader says, no, Mom, Allie has to go with her friends to those kids and tell them to stop doing that, which is a much better answer. And whether you're in Mobile, Alabama, adults in Mobile, Alabama, or a second grader in Philadelphia, the idea that it's not someone's going to, this Rosa Parks going to do it for us, or the teacher's going to do it, but we can get together with our friends and we can change something, that we can stand up to something that we need to stand up to. It's two very different ways to teach. I will say one more really good book that probably a lot of you know is Beyond Heroes and Holidays. A really good book for expanding on this notion. Of how we
Beyond Heroes and Holidays, you said?
Mm-hmm. Beyond Heroes and Holidays. It's kind of a compilation of articles in part a compilation of articles from Rethinking Schools. But it's got so many examples because that's what our calendar is often based on, heroes and holidays. So sadly, we are out of time. If you were a whole group, I would have you go around and just say one word that, two if you need it, that summarizes what you're sitting with right now or what you're feeling, what you're thinking. And we would go around and hear those words. But since it's just you, Megan, I will we'll stop here.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm going to stop this recording. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us after the fact. Let me just hit this button.